If the Easter celebration honors the resurrection of Jesus Christ, as some people say it does, as of course all of Christianity observes it in that manner, then as they would reason, does it really make any difference how or when we celebrate that resurrection of Christ?
It's a common misunderstanding, Darius, that okay, these things were pre-Christian in origin. They do come from, let's say, sun worship or fertility worship or things like that that had nothing to do with Christianity. But can't we Christianize those things and make them acceptable forms of worship? Some have gone so far to say, well, God conquers the human heart. Can't He conquer these other religious symbols so that we can use them to honor Christ? The problem with that is we don't ask the question, what does God say? That's really the important thing. We can say, well, I can use anything to worship God. But since God is our Creator, shouldn't we look to Him and find out, does He define how He wants to be worshipped? Does He want us to color an egg and say, this means Jesus' resurrection? Well, we have to look to the Bible to find out, does God even comment about that? And as we said, frankly, God is insulted when we humans try to come up with our own forms of worship when He's very clearly delineated what He expects.
You know, Dave, mankind and cultures have indeed come up with all kinds of differing ideas across the whole spectrum of imagination to worship their concept of God and explain their view of life and their worldview.
Sure. There's an astonishing set of scriptures in Deuteronomy chapter 12 where God was at that point speaking to the nation of Israel, His people, and He said to them that He was going to send them into the promised land. But He gave them a strict warning at that time. When you go into the land that I've given you, do not take the ways of the heathen around you and take their ways of worship and try to apply them to me. Now, it's interesting because He says they go to the extent, every imagination of their heart, to the extent of sacrificing their own children.
Which shows how far man will go away from the true paths of God when they take off down that direction.
Yeah, it was not illogical, it was just wrong. See, their logic was, I'm going to give God the very most important and precious thing to me, my child. Surely God will be pleased with that. Well, that was as far from God's heart as anything could be. So what He did say, instead of going that direction of deciding for yourself, of taking bunnies and eggs and applying them to God, He said, what I tell you to do, in verse 32, that's what you should do. You don't add to it, you don't take away from it. So rather than saying, isn't it okay to take these non-Christian ceremonies and make them Christian, the question we ought to be asking is, what does the Bible say God says? So that's what we ought to find and start to do.
Well then, Dave, we have all of these symbols we've talked about of colored eggs and the traditions of a Good Friday, Sunday morning resurrection and all of that. Taken as a package, what does that really do to the real meaning of the central events of what the Bible does speak to regarding Christ's death and His resurrection? What do all these other traditions and false teachings do to those central truths?
The problem with that, Darius, is that it confuses the issue and hides the real meaning. If I give you an illustration.
Kind of like a charade.
Exactly. When I was a little guy, growing up in the typical Protestant church, our family was quite involved in the church. Every year we went to the Easter sunrise service. Every year we had the Easter egg hunt. We had the Easter baskets and the candy and all these things. And again, maybe it was just my family, but I don't think so. What do I remember about that? What was important to me?
Jelly beans?
The Easter basket, the jelly beans, the chocolate rabbits, the marshmallow chicks, you know.
The real important thing.
That's exactly right. So one might say, well, that's just a nice way to get children attached to it. But the problem is, there's no truth in it. There's no understanding in it. So it actually hides the meaning of what Christ did in giving His life for us and the fantastic miracle that He was resurrected and now sits on the right hand of God advocating for us.
And that's what is hidden by the charade of Easter that hides a lot of the truth of what God is and what God is going to do. You're probably saying right now, yes, I know that Easter and all its symbols are not in the Bible, and I can plainly see that Christ was not resurrected on a Sunday morning. But as long as we keep Easter in a Christian spirit as a kind of remembrance of His resurrection, what difference does it make? The answer depends purely and simply on whether or not God exists. If there is no God, then of course it makes absolutely no difference. But if there is a living God in heaven, and you can prove absolutely that there is, and if that God says it makes a difference to him, then it had better make a difference to you as well as to me. The Easter tradition cannot be supported by your Bible, but you can learn how Christ taught his disciples to remember his death and resurrection. The way is taught in the pages of your Bible. Read the literature offered on this program to learn how to worship God in spirit and truth. It'll change your life. Dave, thanks for being with us on the program.
You're welcome, Dennis.
Remember, when you're looking to understand your future, this is the program Beyond Today. Thanks for watching.